I refuse to work overtime without pay, and now they're more afraid of me than they respect me. Let me start with this: I never wanted to be the kind of person who kept score. But when your job starts to feel more like a hostage situation and less like employment, the scoreboard keeps itself. It all started the night I didn't go back inside. Let me explain. I work in IT at a mid-sized logistics company. We'll call it Meyer Distribution, but honestly, I hope they read this and feel the sting. I was one of those essential folks during the pandemic. I kept the systems alive. I kept drivers paid. I made sure your precious next day packages arrived on time. But appreciation? Nah. Management treated us like a cost center that needed to be squeezed dry. The culture was clear: overtime is expected. Not paid, not even officially requested. Just expected. If you left before 6 p.m., you'd get side eyes. Left before your boss? You might as well have dropped your badge in the trash on the way out. Anyway, that night, it was 5:58 p.m., and I was halfway through a stale tuna sandwich I hadn't gotten around to eating at lunch. That's when my manager, Brad, the type who uses phrases like "let's circle back" and "this should be easy" when he means "do this thing I forgot and now it's your problem," came into my cubicle. "Hey, can you hop on a quick call with Denver? Their servers are acting up again," he said, already halfway back to his office. I didn't even look up. "I'm off the clock." Silence. I heard him stop. Then backpedal. "I'm sorry? I'm off the clock. I clocked out at 5:30. Remember? Because you told me last week we don't get overtime approval anymore. So, I'm heading out." His expression was a whole journey. Confusion, then disbelief, then the kind of tight-lipped anger that comes from someone who's never been told no in his life. "You're really going to leave Denver hanging?" I stood up. "Packed my stuff. If it's important, I'll handle it tomorrow. Or you can call one of the interns. I'm not a volunteer." I walked out. That was the moment. I didn't know it yet, but that was the first crack in the porcelain facade they'd built, where loyalty meant unpaid labor and team player meant doormat. The next day? The vibe was different. Brad didn't say good morning. Emails that usually came straight to me went to the team. They even CC'd my coworker Alex on a task that was clearly mine. It was a cold shoulder, sure. But here's the kicker: I didn't mind. For the first time in years, I felt like I had a spine again. But what came next? That's when the real story starts. Because when they tried to get rid of me, they learned the hard way that I was the wrong person to push. And I had receipts. After that night, the entire office vibe shifted. You'd think I'd slapped Brad's grandma or keyed the CEO's Tesla. But all I did was go home on time. Apparently, in corporate America, that's grounds for social exile. First came the isolation. The Monday after I said no, I noticed that everyone in my usual morning huddle was getting invites except me. The IT team held stand-ups without me. Slack channels went quiet. Projects I'd started were handed off to Alex, who, by the way, is about as competent as a potato with a Wi-Fi signal. Then came the guilt tripping. Brad pulled me into a touch base and gave me the whole speech. "You know the one. We just need team players right now. We're all doing more with less. You stepping away sends a message, and it's not a great one." I looked him dead in the eye and said, "Good. I meant to send a message." He blinked. Like he couldn't believe the furniture was talking back. So then, they did what all passive-aggressive companies do when someone stops playing the patsy: they weaponized HR. Enter Linda. Linda was the kind of HR rep who smiled like a mannequin and used the word policy like it was a threat. She called me in for a routine performance review, the kind that wasn't due for another 3 months. In that meeting, they told me my attitude had become a concern. That my refusal to adapt was hurting team morale. That there were concerns about collaboration. I leaned forward. "So? I'm being written up for not working unpaid overtime?" Linda's face twitched. "We're not saying that." I pulled a USB drive out of my bag. Because I've got 2 years of emails, Slack messages, and calendar invites showing exactly how often I stayed late. Want to talk receipts? Now it was her turn to blink. "That little flash drive? Oh yeah. I'd been documenting everything since 2021. Every time Brad said, "Can you just do this one thing before you leave?" Every favor that somehow turned into 4 extra hours. Every weekend I worked, unpaid, to keep the systems running. That meeting ended real quick. But here's where it turns. Because you'd think they'd back off after realizing I was documenting everything, right? Wrong. They tried to fire me. No warning. No PIP. Just an email from HR saying I was no longer a good fit and that my departure would be effective immediately. Big mistake. Because what they didn't know was this: my cousin, the guy I grew up sharing a bunk bed with, is a labor lawyer. And the stuff I had on that USB drive? Let's just say it wasn't just good, it was damning. Unpaid labor. Retaliation. Constructive dismissal. Violations of federal and state labor laws. Within 48 hours, Meyer Distribution received a very polite letter from my cousin's firm, with a big fat packet of documentation attached. The firing? Retracted. The write-up? Expunged. And Brad? Well, Brad was suddenly very interested in scheduling a reconciliation lunch. But I wasn't done. Because if they thought I'd stop just because they tried, and failed, to fire me, they had no idea who they were messing with. Next, I made them bleed. Wanna hear how? Part 3's coming, and trust me, it's the revenge arc everyone dreams about. You ready for it? They thought retracting my termination would buy my silence. That I'd be so relieved to keep my job, I'd crawl back into the cubicle like a good little worker bee and keep my mouth shut. Nah. I'm not built like that. The second they tried to bury me, I decided, if I'm going down, I'm taking the whole damn building with me. And I meant it. Now, I didn't show up the next day swinging. That's not how you win. I played it smart. Strategic. Cold. I came in early, not to work, but to document. Every door I walked through, every meeting I sat in, every request Brad made, I logged it. I even started recording calls legally, mind you, because in my state, single-party consent means I only needed my approval. And approve I did. But the real play? That came 2 weeks later. The day of the company-wide compliance audit. See, every year, Meyer Distribution brought in a third-party compliance firm to do an internal review. HR hated it. Managers loathed it. But it was the one time someone outside the company got to peek behind the curtain. So I peeked with them. I requested a meeting with the compliance team. Private, off the record. I showed them the email Brad sent telling me to just get it done without asking about pay. I showed Slack messages where he joked about billing hours to loyalty. I showed them timestamps from the security logs, badge-ins and badge-outs that proved I was putting in 60 to 70-hour weeks with no OT. Their eyes got real wide. Then I dropped the big one, a spreadsheet of over 30 employees, names redacted, who had quietly told me they were doing the same thing. Working unpaid. Afraid to speak up. That was the spark. The next week, an anonymous survey went out to the whole company. Do you feel pressured to work unpaid overtime? Do you believe retaliation is a concern in your department? Oh, it blew up. People finally started talking. Sharing. Opening up. HR was flooded. The compliance team had to extend their visit by 2 extra weeks because of the flood of allegations. And then it happened. The CEO, Mr. Big-Time Executive who thought a pizza party once a quarter made him a good guy, came to the office. In person. Which never happened. He stood in front of the entire department and gave a speech about rebuilding trust and company values. But the silence in that room? You could feel it. People were done clapping for crumbs. Brad, by the way? He looked like a ghost. Because he knew. He knew this all traced back to me. And for the first time, I wasn't scared of him. He was scared of me. Because I wasn't just an employee anymore. I was a liability. A walking, talking legal threat wrapped in khakis and a grudge. After that speech, Brad tried to bury the hatchet. He showed up at my desk like we were old war buddies. Hey, man. Rough couple of weeks, huh? Water under the bridge? I didn't even look up. I'm off the clock, Brad. The color drained from his face. And just like that, I became the one person in the office no one messed with. But the best part? That hadn't even been my endgame. Because while they were trying to fire me, I was quietly building something that would make sure I never had to clock in for anyone else ever again. So let's rewind a bit. While all that chaos was erupting at Meyer Distribution, the HR drama, the compliance scandal, Brad turning into a corporate ghost, I was busy laying bricks. Not the kind you stack. The kind you scale. See, I'd been nursing a side hustle for a while. Nothing flashy. Just fixing busted security protocols for small businesses on the side, stuff like HIPAA compliance, VPN setups, data encryption audits. At first, it was grocery money. Then it was rent. Then, one day, a law firm paid me $4,500 for a weekend gig, and I realized, why the hell am I still answering to Brad? So while Meyer was imploding, I went full throttle. I built a site. I got a logo. I networked like hell. Started cold emailing mid-tier businesses, targeting the ones I knew were one breach away from a PR disaster. I didn't sleep much that month. But I didn't care. Because every time I deposited a freelance check, I was one step closer to freedom. And then, opportunity knocked. No, it kicked the damn door in. A national logistics company bigger than Meyer, way bigger, somehow caught wind of my work. They'd been burned by a cyber attack and were looking to overhaul their whole infrastructure. They wanted someone nimble, smart, discreet. Someone like me. That contract? It was 6 figures. 6 figures. I almost dropped the phone when I saw the offer. Not only was it more money than I'd ever made in a year, it came with a clause that I got to subcontract if I wanted to scale. And here's where it gets delicious. You remember Alex? The potato with a Wi-Fi signal who inherited my projects after I said no to overtime? Yeah. He got let go. The audit exposed just how many critical systems he botched. Brad tried to cover for him, but the compliance team wasn't having it. So Meyer cut him loose. Guess who applied to my firm? I won't lie. I almost didn't hire him. But then I thought, nah. Let's make this poetic. So I brought him on. And I paid him fair. Respected his time. Trained him up. And within 3 months, Alex was thriving. He even pulled me aside one day and said, I had no idea it could be like this. I thought the grind was just normal. It hit me then, Meyer wasn't just toxic. It was conditioning people to think abuse was professionalism. But karma, my friend, wasn't done. 3 months after I signed that big contract, Meyer Distribution announced a leadership restructuring. Translation? Brad got canned. Hard. Turns out, those loyalty hours he bullied people into logging? Yeah, illegal as hell when your own emails tell folks not to report overtime. The best part? I got an email. From Brad. Subject line, quick catch up? Body, hey, I heard about your new company. Would love to grab a coffee and pick your brain about some opportunities. Let me know. I stared at it for a long time. Then typed back 2 words. Off the clock. Sent. Blocked. Done. At that moment, it hit me. I hadn't just survived a toxic workplace. I'd beaten it. Outsmarted it. And now, I wasn't someone's employee. I was the guy they called when their world caught fire. But there's still one more piece to this story. Because Meyer? They tried one last move, a desperate one. So, after months of silence, with Brad gone and my new business taking off like a rocket, I figured Meyer Distribution would finally fade into the background like a bad ex you don't even bother blocking, just delete the number and move on. But no. These people don't go quietly. It started with a cease and desist. Yep. A thick envelope showed up at my apartment one morning, slapped with legal letterhead and more condescension than a country club board meeting. Inside? A formal accusation that I had violated a non-compete agreement, that my new firm was poaching clients and profiting from proprietary knowledge. Let me pause here and say this, if that's what they were going with, they were really reaching. First off, I never signed a non-compete. I refused when they gave it to me 2 years ago, and they let it slide because, at the time, I was the only one who knew how to manage their aging logistics software without it exploding every 30 minutes. Second, I wasn't poaching anyone. Meyer was a dumpster fire with servers. My clients were their competitors, ones who had been actively losing business thanks to Meyer's constant outages and security breaches. Irony, right? So I sent the whole mess over to my cousin, remember, the labor lawyer? Within a day, he was cackling over the phone. "They're bluffing," he said. "This isn't a lawsuit. It's a tantrum with a letterhead." But here's where I got surgical. Because rather than just brush it off, I saw an opportunity. Meyer Distribution had made one fatal mistake. They thought I was still playing defense. I wasn't. So I went on offense. I gathered every piece of documentation I had, not just the unpaid labor stuff, but the way they tried to fire me, the internal retaliation, the emails encouraging silence about system vulnerabilities. I even included screenshots of a Slack thread where Brad literally said, "Let's not log this as OT, it's all hands on deck week anyway." Then I sent it to the Department of Labor. And while I was at it, I forwarded everything to a journalist friend of mine who worked for a tech business blog. Title of the piece when it went live: "Inside the Collapse of a Logistics Giant, Unpaid Labor, Retaliation, and the Whistleblower Who Fought Back." The fallout? Catastrophic. Their biggest client, a national grocery chain, dropped them within the week. Their Glassdoor reviews exploded. Lawsuits started stacking up from other former employees who finally realized they weren't crazy or alone. I became that guy in tech circles. The one who said no, who fought back, and who won. And Meyer? Meyer started bleeding money. They slashed departments, sold off assets, and eventually, they filed for Chapter 11. I didn't just beat them. I buried them. 1 year later, I was sitting on the balcony of my downtown loft, sipping coffee from a mug that said "Not Your Employee," watching the sun rise over the skyline. My firm had 5 full-time employees. We just landed a new government contract. My phone buzzed nonstop, this time with opportunities, not obligations. Sometimes people ask me if I regret how far I took it. I don't. Because this isn't just a story about overtime. It's about dignity. About knowing your worth. About what happens when someone stops saying, "It's fine," and starts saying, "No." So the next time your boss corners you with that smarmy smile and says, "Can you just stay late?" It's only a few hours. Think of me. And say it. I'm off the clock. Then walk away. Because trust me, that's where the power is.